If you are just tuning in, you are listening to the best live stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. That means it's Random Topic Thursdays with Gavin Richard only on channel GBoo 2786. Also on Gavin Richard, the self entitled YouTube channel, Facebook Live, and we are streaming also on Periscope. Whoever you are, wherever you are, hope you are blessed and doing safe. We have a special guest for us today, and an old friend of the show, retired detective out of Brockton, Massachusetts. Well, he's not in Brockton, but from Brockton, Massachusetts Police Department, Ken Williams, who is also an expert on police brutality. We're going to be looking at several things, but of course, the breaking news earlier today is that the Brooklyn Center Police Chief, Tim Gannon, and Kim Potter, the woman who shot Daunte Wright, has resigned from the police force. We'll get into that in a second. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gavin Richard Presents, and it's time to cue the music. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Gavin Richard Presents, a special early hour of doubleheader, as I should say, because later on today we're going to have on Sister Taisha Essex. I was a guest on her show yesterday, and we're going to speak about this gun control as well as House Bill or HR 127. You know, I've been an open critic about that and called for renewed gun control. But right now I want to bring on a special guest and friend, Mr. Ken Williams, who is a retired detective out of the Brockton Police Department. Over 20 years, he worked homicide. He's a native of Lakeville, Massachusetts. I got that one right. Shout out to Madam Magma. How you doing, dear? Hello, B1, out of East Oakland, California. I also want you all to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. You see the ticker at the bottom. Please donate to the channel. We're going to get into it right quickly and talk to Ken. Ken, how are you doing first and foremost?
Hey, what's going on, brother? Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you for coming on last minute at the last minute with this. But I guess we can get right into it. Hope you and your family are doing blessed. But the sad we're meeting under these circumstances. Earlier today, ladies and gentlemen, it was reported there was a special press conference at from the mayor of Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, with regards to Mayor Mike Elliott announced that Tim Gannon, who is the police chief of was the police chief, I would say, of Brooklyn Center, has stepped down, as well as Kim Potter, the woman who shot Daunte Wright on video camera. She has also stepped down as well. They released the body camera footage of Daunte Wright being shot yesterday by the police, and of course, it has caused outrage throughout the country and Brooklyn Center. There have been protests. There have been people looting, of course, and rioting as a result of this. And many people are wondering what is going to happen. She's stepping down, but there were calls at this press conference that she not step down, that she be immediately fired, obviously for reasons where she's not going to be able to claim any benefits or so forth. This is the video that CNN had released.
Wright begins to resist as cuffs are placed on him, and he gets back into the vehicle.
Now let me rewind. This is not to. It's disturbing, of course. This is just to show. I noticed something my father pointed out.
Sunday, police pulled over Wright.
And I was looking at it. So Wright gets out of the car here
because he had an expired registration on his license plate. The release footage begins minutes into the stop and shows police walking up to the car, and then Wright is seen stepping out of his vehicle. Police then tried to take Wright into custody after discovering he has an outstanding warrant. The video shows Wright begins to resist as cuffs are placed on him, and he gets back into the vehicle.
Yeah, she's...
As I watch the video and listen to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. This appears to me, from what I viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge that resulted in the tragic death of Mr. Wright. The officer is currently on administrative leave.
Wright drove several blocks before hitting another vehicle, according to police. Police and medical personnel attempted life-saving measures following the crash, but Wright died at the scene. Wright's mother, Katie, told CNN affiliate Care TV she was on the phone with her son before the shooting. It's unclear to CNN how Katie Wright knew police had hung up the phone. Protests erupted in a suburb outside Minneapolis in the aftermath of a shooting. Hundreds taking to the streets Sunday night, clashing with police. The National Guard was also on the scene. The situation turned violent. Crowds marching toward the police department swarmed police cars and started destroying them. Police moved in to disperse the crowds. The chief of police also said bricks and frozen soda cans were thrown at officers, injuring one who was taken to the hospital. And while one group stayed at the police department, a second group of protesters went to a strip mall where businesses were broken into and looted.
We recognize that this couldn't have happened at a worse time.
The city of Brooklyn Center is only about 10 miles from where former police officer Derek Chauvin is on trial for the killing of George Floyd. The chief of police says he released the footage to be transparent and became emotional when I asked what was on his heart.
I'm the leader of this department. They expect me to lead, to create a safe city. That's what I'm trying to do. So that's it. Okay. And yeah, I'm emotional.
Now I'm pausing the video and I want to stop here. I'm gonna bring Ken in. Something that caught my attention, what I was trying to say earlier that my father noted, but I noted this really, is that she goes, and when Mr. Wright is out of the car, I noticed that, and obviously when he fights to get back in, she reaches for her pistol and she's screaming, taser, taser, taser. And it seems like a total of 4 or 5 seconds. And I think the timing is crucial, goes by before she fires that fatal shot into Mr. Wright's stomach. Ken, from what you watched, did you see anything first and foremost that the officers did wrong? Obviously, she's mistaken a pistol. That's the main wrong thing. But even with getting out of the car, because some things were pointed out on CNN that I had heard that they did wrong, and I'm just trying to see if you may feel the same.
I mean, every police officer has, the purpose of the stop at that moment in time was they were clearly going to make an arrest, based on some warrants or something like that were active in the system, from what I heard in the video. Right. In terms of, the actions after that, it's important for everyone to to parse out the fact that at the end of the day, whether a police officer accidentally discharges a weapon and kills somebody or purposefully does it, at the end of the day, the negligence on the police officer's part is well established in the video.
Right.
The police chief during the press conference says, he's watched the video. He's assessed the fact that it's an accidental discharge and doesn't have intent. But that doesn't negate the fact that there's involuntary manslaughter that would be a crime or a charge that you could, charge somebody with that has no concern with whether or not the officer had intent or not at that moment in time to cause harm. It's just a negligence that should be looked at. You can't be an unarmed citizen shot dead by a police officer. And at the same time, police officers are some of the most well-trained individuals on the planet. You can't mistake your gun for your taser. It's kind of hard.
And I'm looking at it. It's like she's got it in front of her. The taser is black. The gun is black. The taser is yellow usually, although I have seen tasers that they've tried to say have a black top on it, but
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It would be crazy for anyone who has handled firearms
for 26 years.
It's crazy to even say that you mistaken your taser in your gun. First of all, this wasn't split second. This wasn't a rapid kind of dynamic situation. The gun was out for a while in her hand.
Yeah,
and she moved in with the firearm in her hand. And it's very clear that, it's not a taser. A taser and a gun don't even feel the same in your hand as far as the weight goes.
Different. The hold is about it. Somebody asked, what about the safety? I think different revolvers are it's not a revolver, excuse me. Guns are different, but still, even without the safety, the bottom line is that she should know the difference as a 26-year veteran. This was a woman who was also the president of the police union.
But let's back this up for a second. And it's probably stuff that people aren't really discussing. But without knowing what kind of holster she has, I'm assuming that it's a police officer grade retention holster, which means that there are certain things you have to do to get your gun out of the holster, which is not what you have to do to get a taser out of the holster. With a retention holster, that's a law enforcement firearm retention holster, you got to push down, pull forward, pull out, whereas a taser just comes right out of the holster. These, two different dynamics.
And this, this sounds eerily similar to what happened with, there's actually two cases I think of. Was 4 years ago when Terrence Crutcher out in, I believe it was Oklahoma City, was shot by a woman named Shelby, Officer Shelby. He has his hands up. He goes back to his car. He's still with his hands up. And she claims she thinks he's reaching in. She fires a shot and kills him. Right. We have the Botham John situation. Botham John, and she was acquitted, by the way. Botham John, where Amber Geiger kills Botham John in his own apartment, and she's argues mistake of fact. I have a sneaking suspicion, although she admitted on the videotape that she shot him and knew what she did. The negligence part, as you said, is established. But I have a sneaking suspicion her attorneys, the criminal defense attorney, is going to try and argue that same thing. That's just me.
Well, I think the standard here is different only because unlike some of those other cases where the police were raising a threat, there's no threat here. There's no question that she says out of her mouth that what her brain was processing was a less than lethal encounter, that he wasn't going back into the car, that he wasn't going for a gun, because she's the person that's yelling taser, and that's what's on her mind. So to take a taser, what's supposed to be a taser, but turns out to be a deadly weapon, and discharge the weapon, that places her in a bit of a jeopardy. It's a different situation, I think, than those other cases.
Hannibal says, so y'all going to ignore the fact that Daunte ran into his car, which escalated to him getting killed. Well, that doesn't excuse him running back in the car. They already searched him when they patted him down and was getting him out and arrested him. So the fact that he ran back into the car, while that may be a crime in of itself, and it is, if you want to say flight from an officer or resisting arrest, this was a misdemeanor, the warrant that he was serving. So that does not justify killing him, especially if he was searched and you didn't see any weapons on him. You fired the wrong shot. So that takes care of that.
And from the law, from the standpoint of the law, which law enforcement officers are trained through the academy and receive annual trainings, Tennessee versus Gardner is very clear, very bright line case that states that police officers, law enforcement officers, can only use deadly force in the case of someone trying to elude police if they pose an immediate threat to others out there. And in this case, this is not a fleeing felon. This is a guy that just had a warrant.
Felon in Hannibal, you keep saying the same damn thing. It doesn't matter that he was resisting arrest. Yes, that's wrong, but he's not a threat. That's the issue. The Supreme Court.
Well, let's take it a step further. If the person's resisting arrest, she wasn't out there by herself. There are other police officers that were there that they would have overwhelmed him with force anyway. And it didn't have to come down to him being shot. It can't come down to him being shot because he didn't pose an immediate threat.
Right. You know, if it's a felony stop, that's one thing. This wasn't a felony stop. And supposedly this was over air fresheners. They said that were obstructing his view.
Sure.
Yeah. That was, you know, and I talked with Taisha yesterday, and she talked about some of the crimes that cops, the traffic stops that cops look for in order to try and beef up even to get an arrest on someone.
And I think we should be fair. The stop, from what I understand, I don't know if it was valid or not, but at the end of the day, if he has a warrant, he has a warrant. And at the end of the day, if he's resisting because he doesn't want to go to jail at that moment in time, he can resist, but there are several police officers out there to take care of that.
Yeah, if he has a warrant, yeah, he has a warrant. But I mean, at that time, the cops, when they stop you, they don't know that until they get your
right. If he's not the owner of the vehicle, if when they ran the tags, it didn't come back as far as he being the owner of the vehicle with a warrant. All I'm saying is that at some point in time, they made a determination that he had a warrant. You know.
Right. So right. Yeah. And so of course, the mayor, the city manager, he actually was fired. I'm looking at this earlier today. You guys can check this out on kstp.com. They've stated that they have fired the city manager. I don't know did you see the press conference, Ken, yesterday?
You know, the press conference was crazy. I mean, the chief got out there, and the chief, you know, even in the the video that you showed earlier, the chief is admitting the fact that it's clear as day that, hey, you know what, the officer discharged their weapon. One of the press reporters at the time asked, okay, well, chief, that's great. You watched the video, you concur that this is an accidental discharge of a weapon. Who's going to arrest the officer now? You know what I mean? What's the next step? And that's when everyone goes silent. And then later on in the day, the mayor takes over the leadership of the police department. And today we have, of course, yesterday the city manager was fired, and then the police chief and the police officer in question resigned. And all I'm asking is, why is it so hard to fire a bad cop? This is crazy. Why would a chief resign? Why would a city manager get fired? And based on the nuances of what usually happens behind the scene, the police chief can't necessarily fire a police officer unless they have the blessings from the city or jurisdiction that they work for. Usually chiefs can discipline up to 5 days. And then if they want to terminate, they got to go to the city manager or somebody like that and sit down with them to get their blessings on that. So what basically seems to have happened behind the scenes potentially is either the chief didn't want to fire the officer, or the city manager didn't want to fire the officer, or they both didn't want to fire the officer. And right now, everyone is gone except the officer in question isn't charged with a crime yet.
Yeah. Officer in charge is not charged with a crime yet. She's allowed to step down. I don't know if it was accepted formally by the mayor's office. He has actually, according to this, the council passed a motion 3-2 to give the mayor authority over the police department to his office. So, yeah. So I see this. What's up, Shaq? Just saying hello to all of my frequent subscribers and people that are in here. Yeah. So I find that very interesting. But yeah, when I watched the press conference, too, remember the chief, he actually stepped out and left halfway before the conference was over. I was like, what was that about?
Because the questions that were coming his way were, okay, great. You watched the video. You made a determination. You're stating publicly that she did things wrong. What are you going to do about that, Chief? And he didn't want to answer those questions.
No, he didn't want to answer it. He became emotional and so forth. And of course, again, when I look at the officer, Kim Potter, she's 26 years old. I'm sorry, not 26 years old. She's a 26-year veteran, including being a police union president. And so I'm looking at this, and everybody should know she shouldn't have, of all people, know better than using her firearm versus a taser. And I mean, the gun was right in front of her the whole time. I see here, this is from BCA that they reported, which is the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And then all of the timing of this, of course, is around what we have going on with George Floyd's trial. Excuse me, let me correct that. I got to get out of that habit. George Floyd is not on trial. It's Derek Chauvin that is on trial for what happened. And typically, that's a result of the programming we see in television where they want to blame the victim and make them put the victim on trial. Earlier today, of course, the prosecution rested their case and the defense has put on their case, which is typically what happens. But they tried to raise a causation argument with George with regards to Derek Chauvin and George Floyd by saying that he was responsible for his own death. But let me play this video here. I don't own the copyrights
Now, late
to it.
tonight, we learned the name of the officer who fired her weapon. Jay Coles is here to tell us who she is. Show us the body camera video released today and tell us what led to this traffic stop yesterday afternoon, Jay.
Yeah, Lindsay, the BCA says the officer who discharged her weapon, striking and killing Daunte Wright with a single bullet, is Officer Kim Potter. She's been with Brooklyn Center for nearly 26 years. Potter also is the head of the Brooklyn Center Police Union. In that role, she helped represent other officers involved in the 2019 deadly shooting. Tonight, her body camera video was released by Brooklyn Center Police. It shows the minute-by-minute events leading up to the shooting of Wright. Brooklyn Center Police say this body camera video shows 3 officers pulling over Daunte Wright for an expired license tab. Police Chief Tim Gannon explains why he made the rare move to release the video without the BCA present. That's the state agency that's leading the investigation.
I felt the community needed to know what happened. They needed to see it. I needed to be transparent. And I wanted to be forthright. I had due respect to Daunte as well.
Shortly after the stop, this is the body camera of Officer Kim Potter. You hear her tell the other officers to have Wright get out of the car. Wright complies, and a few seconds later, one of the officers starts to handcuff him. You then hear Officer Potter say Wright has an arrest warrant. Chief Gannon explains the arrest warrant, which court records show was issued for missing a court date.
I have very little information on the warrant other than it was a gross misdemeanor warrant.
Officers continue to put handcuffs on Wright when he breaks free and gets back into his car, and a struggle ensues in the driver's seat. Officer Potter then approaches with her gun drawn and shouts a command to tase Wright. But 13 seconds later...
I mean, look right there. This is for you, Hannibal. You don't see the gun? You can see where she shot him at.
Chief Gannon says officers are trained to announce the taser command before shooting their tasers.
It is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. This appears to me, from what I viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge that resulted in a tragic death of Mr. Wright.
Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott.
We cannot afford to make mistakes that lead to the loss of life of other people in our profession. And so I do fully support releasing the officer of her duties.
But the Brooklyn Center city manager at the time stopped short of supporting the officer's termination.
All employees working for the city of Brooklyn Center are entitled to due process with respect to discipline. This employee will receive due process, and that's really all that I can say today.
Now, just a few hours after making that statement, the city council voted to give authority over the police department to the mayor instead of city manager Kurt Pogany. After that vote, Mayor Elliott fired the city manager. The BCA also tells me the Washington County Attorney's Office has now agreed to review the case for possible criminal charges against Officer Potter.
Let me ask you this though, Ken. I want to bring it back in. Why is it that all of these, whenever these police shootings happen and take place, the police chief always has to act as typically acts as a defense attorney for his cops? I get standing behind your officers and so forth, and if you don't want to comment on it because of prejudicing the case, I prefer you say that.
Right.
He's saying accident. You believe it's an accidental discharge. You don't know what's in the mind of a defendant or a potential defendant when that happens.
Sure. I mean, let's turn this on its head, and I'll answer it this way. If that had been a black cop out there that shot a white defendant who was resisting arrest for a warrant, we would be talking about the arraignment of that black cop most likely today. The fact that it was a white female police officer, a white police chief, probably a predominantly white police department, I'm assuming, we're talking about she's going to go to bed tonight, sleep in her bed at home, and isn't facing any serious issues right now. Maybe she will in the future, but if this had been a black police officer and a white person who was accidentally shot by a black cop, I'm sure this would not be a discussion that we would be having today. So that's one issue. The next issue is the police chief can't have two victims. You can't have the victim that was wrongfully, shot by the police officer that's a victim, and at the same time claim that your police officer is a victim because they accidentally shot the individual, right?
Right.
If we got people out here that are being charged with crimes for shooting dogs and getting arrested, we have a police officer who's highly trained that shot a human being and killed them, and the other police officer standing around who heard her say to them, "Hey, I shot him," after they heard her say that she was going to tase him. Why did they not react? Why didn't they say, "Hey, you know what? Give me your gun, step in my car, here goes some handcuffs on you while we go figure out what's happening down the street"? This whole delay by law enforcement officers that makes it seem as though they're inept when it's one of their own that commits a crime is really crazy stuff that's happening here.
Yeah, and let me just say this on this note. Well, I want to ask you this on the fact that he had a misdemeanor warrant. What options or if any, with police officers if they find out someone misses it's a misdemeanor warrant for missing a court date?
Sure. I mean, one of your options would be, you know what, guy, you got a warrant. Why don't you go to court right now to take care of that? That's one option. Another option is if the person's running away from you, you could try to chase them down. If you can't catch them, you know who they are, you know where they live because you already got their ID, you got the car that's there that they were driving. You go back and pick them up at another time if that's the case, because the whole point is to minimize the situation so that you don't cause a death over something that's kind of minor. At the other end of the spectrum, that every law enforcement officer is well trained about is civil rights violations. You don't want to go and put yourself in a position where you are jeopardizing your freedom based on you violating someone else's rights or committing a crime. And that's what we're also talking about here. If something is minor and trivial, how far do you go as a law enforcement officer? You're supposed to have good judgment. You're supposed to be fit and have good judgment to understand what you should and should not do, and how about trying to make sure that you protect yourself and others so that at the end of the day, you don't have people in the streets trying to destroy your city. People are in the streets and they're frustrated right now because the police failed to react to
how far do you go? Right. Right, that's right. I just see a comment here. The officer approached, he stated, this is Dad, he stated the officer approached the car with her gun withdrawn. She walked to Daunte Wright with the gun in her hand. Yeah. Well, I mean, from when I looked at the video, at one point, she doesn't have the weapon in her hand, but she orders the officer to get Wright out of the car. Then when Wright resists, she pulls the weapon out.
I mean, she may be the ranking supervisor there as well. That's the reason why she's giving orders.
Right. I would assume that she's the veteran that she is. Yeah.
Or she may be the person with rank. Maybe the other people are just patrolmen.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, there's no way to go and smooth over the fact that you kill somebody accidentally. There's just no way to do that.
Right. And I see that the family, they have hired, I'm trying to be nice. They hired Ben Crump. I have people who have spoken about that. I've actually met Ben Crump once. He seemed like a nice man, but I think a lot of people get frustrated because we see these things happen, and it seems like there's no justice at the end of the day. There's a settlement. The families will go away and get paid, and that money comes from comes from the people. It's not coming from the police officers. They're not paying a price to it at the end of the day. And I learned too that Geiger has filed an appeal. This is just something off the cuff with Botham Jean situation. She has an appeal pending. You aware of that?
I heard about that. That's probably standard. As far as her right to go and appeal.
Well, yeah. That's naturally, but I think part of what hurt that too, or helps that, is the fact that the family went up there, especially the youngest brother, and actually hugged her on the day of sentencing.
Sure.
Along with the judge.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really caught me off guard, because as a judge, you're supposed to be unbiased in your decision making. You can't engage with the defendant or even the prosecutor in that way. I thought, and she caught a lot of flack for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to get to Mr. Nazario in a second, but I do want to just play this quick video. It's sad to watch, but this is, I want everyone to meet Daunte Wright's parents. I have not seen this video before until this morning.
We're joined now exclusively by Daunte's mother and father, Katie and Aubrey Wright, along with their attorneys, Ben Crump and Jeff Storms. Good morning to you all. And Mr. and Mrs. Wright, my family and I join many others in sending our condolences, and we hope that you're getting the support you need to help you during this difficult time. And we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning to talk about your son. Mrs. Wright, you said that your son Daunte called you after he had been pulled over by the police. Can you please share with us what you all said to each other?
He called me and he said, Mom, I've just been pulled over. I said, for what? They said they pulled me over because I had air fresheners hanging in the rearview mirror. I said, okay, we'll take them down. And then he said, well, they're also asking for insurance. And I said, well, when the police officer comes back up to the window, give him the phone and I can explain and give him all the insurance information. And he said, okay. And then the police officers came back up to the window and asked Daunte to step out of the car. And Daunte said, for what? Am I in trouble? And the officer said, we're going to explain that when you step out of the car. And they asked him to put the phone down. And I heard the phone getting put down pretty hard, whether it was on the floor. I don't know where he put the phone down. And then I heard scuffling and the girl that was with him screaming. And I heard an officer ask for them to hang up the phone. And then I didn't hear anything else. I tried to call back 4 times. And then the girl that was with him answered the phone. And she said that they shot him. And he was laying in the driver's seat, unresponsive. And then I heard an officer ask her to hang up the phone again. And then after that was the last time I seen my son. I haven't seen him since.
I'm so sorry. Just the anguish. And Mrs. Wright, you were on the phone for so long with your son, and it seemed at first that the things were under control. Do you have any idea how it escalated the way that it did? Why it escalated the way that it did?
I don't know. I know my son was scared. He's afraid of the police. And I just seen and heard the fear in his voice, but I don't know why. And it should have never, ever escalated the way it did.
No, ma'am. And Mr. Wright, how did you get word, and what did police initially tell you about the shooting, sir?
Well, I got word from my wife. She called me, and she was screaming and telling me what was going on, and I was, it was a normal day for us, and we started off as a normal day. I haven't talked much to the police at all. Haven't pretty much given us any information at all.
We do know that the police chief, he said that he believes that the shooting, that the officer meant to shoot the taser, not her gun, and that it was an accidental shooting. Do you accept that explanation, Mr. Wright?
I cannot accept that. I lost my son. He's never coming back. I can't accept that. A mistake, that doesn't even sound right. This officer has been on the force for 26 years. I can't accept that.
And Mrs. Wright, we know that the mayor has called for this officer to be fired, to be relieved of her duties. What would you like to see happen, ma'am?
I would like to see justice served and her held accountable for everything that she's taken from us.
And we do know that people are outraged, as in the reports, and we're seeing how people are upset. Many people are upset that, again, another Black man has lost his life at the hands of police. But you all have been consistent in calling for peace and calm. So, Mrs. Wright, what do you want to say to those who want to take to the streets?
They always got to ask that.
I want to say thank you so much for the support and standing by us and making sure that my son's name has been heard, and asking for justice and asking for that we get everything that we need out of this, and making sure that my son's name doesn't get swept under the rug and forgot about.
And are you still calling for peace? Are you still hoping
That's my
that
first time seeing this, but
a protest in a peaceful manner?
Yes.
They always ask
Mr.
parents
Crump,
that when this
we know
stuff
that you're
happens.
there in Minnesota for the Derek Chauvin trial, there for the Floyd family, as you're now there with Daunte's family. And as Daunte's father said, and as we said in the report, this police officer, 26 years, not a rookie, 26 years on the force, was actually training another officer at the time. Sir, what has to take place for this to stop happening?
Well, Robin, as Attorney Storms and I learned last night, that she was a training officer. And so it's not about training. It's about implicit bias. It's about giving the same respect and consideration to people of color that we give to white American citizens. We don't see these sort of things happening to white young people that we see happen over and over and over again to young marginalized minorities. They could have given him a ticket, given him a notice to show up, but just like in George Floyd, they could have given him a ticket. They use the most force when it comes to dealing with marginalized minorities. And we can't have these two Americas, one where we treat Black Americans different from white Americans in policing. That's when it will stop, when we start treating each other all the same.
Same treatment. And before we go, Mr. and Mrs. Wright, tell people about your son. Mrs. Wright, tell people what they should know about Daunte.
My son was an amazing, loving kid. He had a big heart. He loved basketball. He had a 2-year-old son that's not going to be able to play basketball with him. He had sisters and brothers that he loved so much. He was an uncle, a grandson. He had a smile that would light up the room. It was so big and bright. And he was amazing. And he's my son. And he's never he just had his whole life taken away from him. We had our hearts pulled out of our chest. He was my baby.
Mr. and Mrs. Wright, thank you for your strength and being with us this morning and sharing about your son. And again, our hearts go out to you. And thank you.
All right. Okay. Yeah, he had a son. He had a 2-year-old baby. You didn't see Unsunken One. I don't know if you saw him in the highlights there, but yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, so that was my first time actually seeing. I saw the mother the other day speak, but I didn't see the father, so it's hard to watch. But yeah, so I wanted to go to that. But if you have any final take on just the Wright comments on Mr. Wright, Miss Ken, and then I can move to the Nazario matter quickly.
I think it's important, Gavin, for us to highlight the fact that words like looting and rioting are very, very racialized kind of words with connotations, right?
Yeah.
We just went through January 6th in the Capitol, U.S. Capitol, where white folks went down there as rioters, terrorists, looters, whatever you want to call them, with bombs and everything, and stormed the U.S. Capitol. And we don't have any asking
Capitol too. They were allowed inside.
Allowed inside. Some stormed the Capitol, but some were allowed inside. But at the end of the day, we don't use these same words. We can't even. The media and the government has problems even calling these people terrorists, charging them with terrorism. So, it's very important that people look at how words are used and how they're racialized.
Yeah. Well, most definitely. And when I saw Robin Roberts, I was like, oh God, because I knew what was going to happen. But yeah, they always ask the black family, do you forgive the cop that kills your child? What do you say about those protesting, all this stuff? It was just basically a way. Well, shout out Bishop G. Williams Scott. He is a frequent contributor to my platform, a viewer. I love talking to him, love seeing him with the Judge Joe Brown channel as well on Fridays. Yeah, they always ask the black family that. I noticed that. But when we have, for instance, if there, I remember when 9/11 happened. I remember when you had the Washington, D.C. sniper, when that happened. They never asked the white families this, of those men and women who died. Do you forgive? What do you want? And even if we ask them what they want, they say they want to go over and kill them. I'm just being real. I'm not encouraging that, but I notice how when you're talking about words like looting and rioting, in particular, how powerful words are. It's called television programming for a reason. It was called TV. That's the abbreviated term. But the real term is television programming because that programs your mind to think a certain way about certain things. Being a resident of New Orleans, I remember white people finding food during Katrina and black people looting. So what you're saying is 1,000% right. That happens. Hello, Miss AP. Prayers, peace, and love. Thank you. She's a first timer here, so it's always good to see you. Rosalind called the Capitol rioters the January 6ers.
I just call them terrorists myself.
Yeah, reporters only use these families to try to calm the anger of the black community. Yeah, Spade says they asked them that because Trump instructs them to, if they advocate for violence, they won't get paid. I did see Samaria Rice's analysis on Black Lives Matter and the stuff that they were going through. And she made a comment how they don't pay Trump was her lawyer at one point, and supposedly he said they don't pay angry black women. So that one doesn't surprise me if they do that. I mean, as an attorney, I know you try to clean your client up as best you can.
Yeah, but I mean, nonviolence goes back to the civil rights movement. You know what I mean? Everyone during the 50s and 60s talked about nonviolence, and at the end of the day, white people ended up killing, Dr. Martin Luther King and stuff like that, assassinating him.
Medgar Evers. I mean, yeah, everybody who advocated for black liberation, whether you're nonviolent or violent, and Malcolm X wasn't violent, he was for self-defense. You know, and he was assassinated, and Dr. King, nonviolent. You know, the most nonviolent person, and they assassinated him. You know, although that was actually, I mean, all of that was government. But
yeah, but I think at the root of it, we need to get through and cut through all the nonsense of all that, because white folks have been violent since they got in America.
Sure.
They were violent against the indigenous people. They were violent against the black people. They were violent against the Mexican. They were violent against the Mexican folks. They were violent against the Chinese, Asian folks. They were violent against everybody. And this whole idea that we're a nonviolent society is crazy.
Well, I mean, America was founded on blood.
Sure.
You had to, in order to, I mean, look, in order for even black people to be free, to end slavery, there had to be a major war that was fought in order to do that. You know, so there are situations where violence, I'm not a violent person.
We're not condoning violence. We're just talking about
history.
Right.
Yeah, and sometimes it was necessary. In order to stop Adolf Hitler, you had to go over there and kill these goosed up in Germans.
Yeah, but I mean, look at the American Revolution. The American Revolution wasn't over paying taxes on tea. It was about paying taxes on human bodies that were black. You know what I mean? That was the separation between England and the United States. And then the Civil War was based on the split between states over trying to go and maintain that system of, you know, human rights violations forever. So, you know, this idea that people aren't violent, white people aren't violent, but black people are violent, that's just, you know, that's just stupid talk that everyone needs to, you know, stop and just know the history of America. And once you understand the history of America, even back in the 60s, when we think about after the civil rights era, and you know, they had commissions in Congress about this stuff. They asked police officers, okay, every day, what do you do? And they said, we go out, we stop, question, and frisk 50 people because we think we're going to find one person that might have a gun or something like that. So Congress asked them, you just harassed 49 people to get to one person. How does that make any sense if the community that you just harassed is going to hate you? And Congress and the courts and the police never changed stop, question, and frisk, right? That's the Terry stop. So that's the genesis of the Terry stop. When we look and fast forward to this very day, and we think about how people are being stopped, questioned, and frisked. For instance, New York City, 5 million people around a housing project, stopped, questioned, and frisked, and then the federal court steps in and says, hey, New York, what are you guys doing? You're harassing all these people. You're violating their civil rights. You've got to reform yourself. We're still seeing the same problems repeat themselves over and over again throughout the timeline in America. That's a problem.
Most definitely. Yeah. You can only push somebody down for so long before they rise up.
That's true.
And knock you out. Next thing I wanted to talk about was what happened with Captain Nazario. I promise not to keep you too long, Ken. I don't know how much time you got.
I got a few minutes. I got a few more minutes.
But I do want to talk about this because I think this is important. This was, of course, the brother who serves in the military. He's actually works with I think he's a doctor with the Army Medical Corps. He's under that. And, of course, this happened in December of 2020. He was driving his new SUV. They were claiming that his license plates weren't visible. They fired the officer involved, one of the officers involved, Joe Gutierrez. Gutierrez was the one, if you listen to the videotape, and I wonder if CNN will have it here, but you all probably have seen it. But this is actually his attorney that is speaking on his behalf.
I want to show some of the body cam video that happened after the lieutenant got out of the car, and then we'll talk about that.
I did it, okay? What the media is spewing with the race relations between minorities and law enforcement, I get it, okay? So like I told you, as far as you not stopping and just doing comfortable and you want to go to the spot, Lieutenant, that happens all the time. It happens to be a lot. And I would say 80% of the time, not always, 80% of the time, it's minorities.
Okay, so and a study in the American Journal of Health for 2016 showed that black men are nearly 3 times as likely than white men to get killed by police. Lieutenant Nazario is both black and Latino. Did he said that he was afraid of the officers because, you know, they pulled him over, guns drawn, get out of the car, you're going to ride the white lightning, and then they pepper sprayed him. I mean, yeah.
He was terrified he was going to get shot. Can you blame him?
Go on. I know it's rhetorical, but
I mean, I don't know what else really to say. Once again, you're facing Joe Gutierrez already having threatened to kill you. I think he was displayed admirable calmness, what I would require and expect from, the United States Army officer to be able to remain that calm, knowing that one wrong move and you're going to die. And it was made worse by the fact that we had one officer telling him to keep his hands out of the window, while the other officer telling him that, he needed to open the door and get out. My client had to figure out which one of those inconsistent commands to, comply with. And, he picked the one to keep his hands out of the air, which is good because, he was terrified that if he was going to move his hands below where Officer Gutierrez could have seen him to undo that seatbelt, they'd have murdered him. And if they'd have murdered him, then what would have happened is the investigation would have revealed that he had a completely legal pistol in that vehicle, and then that's all we would have heard.
Yeah.
Was that the police shot a man with a pistol, not what actually occurred, what we're looking at.
Today, the Sergeant Major of the Army is commenting on the video of Lieutenant Nazario, and here's what he says, and I quote, "He represented himself and our Army well through his calm professional response to the situation. I am very proud of him." So he's not commenting on the litigation, but does your client feel the Army has his back in this?
So from what I understand, his command has been very supportive throughout this entire ordeal. He had informed his command almost immediately after this incident occurred, because it was the right thing to do. And in the event that the officers decided to pull the trigger, if you will, on their retaliation threats. And so from what I understand, the Army has had his back since he told them.
Okay. I was on Dennis Sperling. Shout out to brother Dennis Sperling. He's a fellow attorney. His program earlier today. And he talked about this, and especially how the Army necessarily, in one instance, there was a man who was involved with a cop. They gave an example of this Army officer who was taken down by this cop while he was walking to his house for no reason other than obviously he was being black. And the Army basically hadn't done anything about that. They didn't comment on it, and they didn't comment on this particular, except how he handled himself. But, black men have been fighting for wars for this country for years. And even with that uniform that they wear, they are still treated like a nigger in America. My grandfathers, both of them have served in World War II. My grandfather has about 6 or 8 medals that I could show everybody. I've shown them before from his campaign in the European campaign, bravery, all of those things. He was a sergeant in the Army, and yet when he came home, he couldn't sit at the counter at Woolworth. So we have always had that. The first man to die in the American Revolution, a black man up in Massachusetts, Christmas Atkins. So, but neither here nor there. Ken, when you look at this video, when you've seen the videos and the way officers acted, I'm sure you've watched it 100 times. What did you think, and how Officer Nazario handled the situation?
And Officer Nazario saved his life. I mean,
excuse me. Yeah.
I mean, the lieutenant saved his own life. I mean, we're talking about if he had reached back in that car at any point to relieve himself of that seatbelt, or undo the door, or open the door, that potentially would have placed his life in jeopardy. I mean, the fact that it was a felony stop has never been explained by the police. What prompted it to even be elevated to a felony stop? In order for there to be a felony stop, the police have to be able to show that there was some sort of jeopardy, some sort of immediate threat. So they haven't even explained how this was started off as a routine traffic stop that elevated to a felony stop. And then next, after you get to that part, you then have to understand that at no point in time that the officers they saw he was in uniform. They knew that the license plate of the car was attached to him. They went to the door of the vehicle. They can see inside the car. The window is down. There's never any situation that posed a threat to them. So why exactly do you have to mace a person to help him undo his seatbelt if he's saying to you, I don't want to reach in this car and give you an excuse to shoot me? You can undo my seatbelt for me, but I can't undo it because you're telling me to show me my hands, and I'm doing that. So there's that aspect of it. And then there's the aspect of it, once he is maced, he's out of the car, and they go to put handcuffs on him. What do they tell him to do? Drop to the ground. If the whole point was to arrest him and he's standing outside the car, put the handcuffs on him. What was the reason why he needed to get on the ground?
Mm-hmm.
These are all the things that I see, and they all come back to the same common problem, which is that systemic racism, discrimination, people who are juiced up on power, abusing that power and exacting against minority citizens. It doesn't matter how prominent you are. You could be Oprah Winfrey money, or you could be, lieutenant, or you could be, someone like Daunte. It doesn't matter. The whole point is that we have a systemically racist institution with some bad apples in it, and there are a lot of them in there. And until they figure out who they are by terminating them, we don't get this problem resolved.
Yeah, no, we certainly do not get this problem resolved. And he's lucky to be alive in this whole thing. And I wonder what would have happened then if let's say he did die, if he was killed. I would imagine what the Army's response would be in regards to that. We have, for instance, there's a film, Dennis was reviewing this earlier, and I need to do a review on it, about the 24th Regiment in Houston, Texas. These were the black men who were the Army soldiers who actually got lynched sometime later on after a court-martial when they were experiencing racial prejudice, threats from the citizens in Houston and the Klan. All of these things were going on, and they retaliated and fought back with weapons and guns. Like I said again, there's only so much a human being can take when you keep pushing them further and further.
Sure.
And this is and as a veteran in the Army, I'm sure that this man is trained. I'm sure in knowing how to attack people if he needs to and defend himself. But he played it cool the whole time, and he pulled over into a well-lit area. He was speed. When we talked about the stop, and I mentioned this earlier, it wasn't a felony stop. It was a traffic stop for tags. Had the officers put the light on the window, they would have seen his temporary tag, but it's not really about the tags. It's about the fact that he was a black man in a nice car.
Yeah, but hold on one second. The police in their actions created this, and the
Sure.
police, based on their actions, made it a felony stop. Not that it was a felony stop. It was a routine traffic stop to check out some tags on the car.
Right. They made it worse than what it was supposed to be, escalating the entire situation. And had he been, had it gotten worse, they would have used the fact, well, I fear for my life. I fear for my life. Hey, he had a gun in the car. I don't know what he was reaching for. And what do you do in a situation, Ken, as a former officer yourself, if you're getting two different commands from different officers because they're telling one saying, get out of the car, but the other one saying, still keep your hands up.
The lieutenant did the only thing that he could do, which was the thing that made him the lesser of a target, which was to keep his hands up. At no point in time did he drop his hands. It didn't matter when they came up to the car and had to undo his seatbelt, he still kept his hands up. It didn't matter when he got maced. He kept his hands up. He wasn't dropping his hands at all. He clearly understood the danger that he was in because he verbalized it. He said, I don't know what's going on with you guys, but it seems like you're here to hurt me. And one of the officers, I believe, responded back like, yeah, it was his day to get jammed up. So
yeah, he said you're going to get ready to feel the lightning.
If someone's going to threaten you, take it for what it means.
Yeah. He said he said I'm scared for my life, and he said you should be. So that was proof enough. That was enough for me to show that they were going to kill him, especially Gutierrez. And he was fired on yesterday, I believe, as a result of that video going out. And it's interesting too, Ken, when we talk about, we saw what happened with regards to these protests over the national anthem, how it disrespects the troops and so forth. I just wanted to read what the comments were going to be on some of these websites. And from some people, especially since, hey, this is a veteran. And what would they say about a veteran getting maced and tased out of a car? And
I mean, both of those police officers should be terminated.
Well, let me show you something, because I need to show this the other officer should be terminated as well. And honestly, they could be prosecuted for aggravated assault with a firearm.
Sure.
But I want to show you this too, show everybody this. This is a white supremacist named Greg Kelly. Okay. And Tariq Nasheed tweeted about this, but he's trying to defend the police department. One more little tidbit: the bad Lieutenant Nazario had a loaded gun on the floor of the car in the front seat by his leg, something the corrupt folks in the media won't say for some reason.
We can't get into the minds of crazy people, man. You know what I mean?
No, but we can
they're crazy.
No, this is just a white supremacist.
I know. They're crazy as hell, man. We can't get into their minds.
Well, I responded. So, you got to cut the bullshit out. His hands were out of the window. He never reached around, and a traffic stop doesn't legally warrant a search unless the officers had probable cause. They didn't know that, but suspected white supremacists obviously don't think constitutional rights apply to blacks, right?
Right.
That's correct. So, yeah, but this is a Marine, supposedly, a United States Marine Corps veteran. So this is what they think of black people, especially black soldiers. You know, I kind of what I see it as, Ken, they certainly do not like a black man in uniform. It's a threat to them to see a black man wearing a soldier's uniform.
It may or may not be, but at the end of the day, this was civil rights violation. It's abuse of authority. It's abuse of the power that was given to them to police that community, and they should be prosecuted. They should both be terminated. I think they should definitely, certainly, like we talked about, maybe some criminal charges brought against them, and the Department of Justice, because that department receives federal grant monies. I'm assuming that they do. The Department of Justice should be down there investigating what's going on down there in Virginia as well.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. This stuff is crazy, man, but desperate times we live in. Ken, I will not keep you any longer, my brother. I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you, follow you.
Certainly. My website is KWill Services, KWILL services.com. I'm a use of force police practices expert, former law enforcement officer, and I get retained to assess use of force type of cases, police practices cases.
All right, most definitely. So KWILL.
Services.com. Yeah, KWillServices.com.
KWillServices.com, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to have Ken on. And thank you. I appreciate it, brother. You do well in law school.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you'll be all right. And let me just say, too, in the comments, because someone mentioned this. They said my daddy was a Marine. It was disrespectful. Yeah, it was highly disrespectful. But my point being with all of this is that, there's certainly something to be said. It's like an insult to them that you would dare serve this country or say that you're part of it. But those cops were actually, one of them did state that he served in the military as well when he's going back and forth with Lieutenant Nazario. So maybe he was mad he couldn't make officer. I don't know. You never know. But thank y'all for the commentary. Thank you all for being in the chat. Please subscribe to the channel. Also donate to the Cash App, Gavin Richard Esquire. I'll be back in another hour with the lovely Taisha Essex. We'll be talking about House Bill 127. And Rosalind, thank your father for his service. He served in Vietnam. So I know that was a hard war. All right. Well, this was a great live. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it again.
All right. Thanks, brother.
All right. And you all have been tuning in to another edition of Gavin Reshaw Presents. We'll be back in another hour. I'll holla. Peace.